Hi everyone, so I would rather not annoy you with a disclaimer, and I just want to get straight to what we came for. Now, this is, I would say, a review on Fahrenheit 451, but the thing, of course, is that I really didn't like this book, and so this is a pretty negative review, in which case a lot of you might consider it a rant review, and therefore I didn't word it as a review in the title, because most of this video is pretty much the reasons why I dislike this book so much. Not only do I disagree with this book in a way, but I also think that even as a story, it's just not told well. I know that a lot of people had to read this in high school. I didn't have to read it in high school, but I did read it in high school for the first time when I was 16, and I didn't really care for it, but I just kind of forget about it. And recently I reread this book, and I dislike it even more, pretty much. So 5 points, and each point is either no star, half a star, or a full star. And the first point is writing style, and to this I do give a half star. A lot of people think that the writing style is especially good in this book. I do have to disagree, although I do think that it is kind of the better aspect of the book. Most of it is either like lazy, bland explanation, not really description, but just straight up explanation, or it is so flowery that you really have to struggle to understand what even is going on in the first place. By which I mean you kind of have to force yourself to picture things like a character's expression or their surroundings and stuff like that, because it's, you know, he gives you flowery descriptions of them, but you don't really quite get it because it's just like a clever, quirky way of writing and not really so much giving you a good image of what's going on, a vivid image, I think. And like I said, the rest of it is just really dull and bland, and it explains things like saying, smiling furiously or asking insanely. I mean, I don't think that's impossible to do, but how does that happen? How would you describe the way a person asks insanely or smiles furiously? Because that's the work that the writer is supposed to do for you, paint the picture for you so that you can interpret it. If the writer interprets obviously this is a matter of taste and all, but this is my taste, and I do think that it does not make a lot of sense for for the writer to interpret everything for you, because then why are you reading it? The reason why it's actually just half a star is because I found a couple parts that I thought were very nicely written and I like them a lot. I'm trying to find one right now. There's this one in page 117. The narrator says, "Now, sucking all the night into his open mouth and blowing it out pale, with all the blackness left heavily inside himself, he set out in a steady jogging pace. He carried the books in his hands." I think it's very clever, sucking all the night into your open mouth and blowing it out pale. Your breath is white, but you suck in the night, which is really the air of the night. But I think that was very nice. One of the few highlights of this book in terms of writing style. Now for plot and world building, which I will also add on this point, I gave it no star. The characters at times, especially the main character, Guy Montag, he makes kind of senseless decisions. Mostly talking about the part where, this is kind of a spoiler, but I'm being very vague about it. When he's reading poetry to these women and all that, that's pretty much just something that serves to advance the plot, but it makes no sense for him to do it. There's no explanation or justification for it other than he didn't know what he was doing, or he was just really being impulsive or whatever. Also, him and Faber wanting to see whether BT1 was on their side, even though he had been hostile to him, to the main character before that, and that put their plan at risk. So it was, again, kind of a senseless decision. Generally making the other firemen suspicious of him from the beginning, for really no reason at all, was which I understood. I felt that he was almost like deliberately making them suspicious at times. And it felt kind of lazy in terms of storyline because it just didn't feel like something that the character would naturally do. To me, the world just makes no sense. I'm going to be honest here. It's not like I want it to be realistic. Obviously, I understand that this is science fiction, but why is anything happening here? I mean, maybe in the 50s things were actually very, very different from what they're now. I mean, in this aspect. I doubt in this particular case that they were that different because, I mean, in the history of humanity, 60, 70 years is not even that much. Yes, things have changed a lot, but people tend to respect readers a lot, and reading is something that people do very much associate with being intelligent, being smart. Readers and people who read a lot of books are very useful in different ways to society, even in capitalism and so on. So there's just really no way to connect this whole thing of wanting to burn books and not wanting anyone to read books and the world working in the first place. People have all these inventions, for example, so many like inventions that pretty much again just serve to advance the plot. So many of these inventions, how could they have happened in a world where people don't read books, or at least they're very limited in their freedom to read books? That just doesn't really make a lot of sense, and that was not really something that was explored at all in this novel. I mean, what's the logic in this world? Who even benefits from burning books? I know that at some point a character explains that people don't like being challenged and thinking deeply and so on, but who benefits from banning books? I mean, yes, I know that in the story it is meant to be kind of a democratic decision, but it still doesn't quite feel like something that would ever happen. It feels so far-fetched. Nothing in the world building makes it at all believable or scary as dystopia usually is supposed to be. And if books were being burned because the population themselves didn't want books, why isn't the social pressure, the extreme social pressure in this case, be enough so that you don't even need to ban books because people are so socially punished for reading books that you don't even need to be legally punished? I mean, I don't know, man. This whole thing, it just doesn't quite connect in my head. My next point 3, is characters, which also has no stars, probably the weakest point of this book. The dialogue is actually terrible. Everyone is constantly being so transparent with their intentions, pretty much telling their feelings directly through dialogue. I mean, there's nothing that people have to really hide that much of or anything. People just say things that nobody really ever says. At times, they're just having like an internal monologue, or more like characters are having a monologue while having a dialogue in a way that just doesn't really work in real life, and even in fiction it doesn't really work like that because you're supposed to be talking to someone else through dialogue, and that's not really what monologues are. And there's actually a point in which Clarice, one of the first characters to be introduced, tells him that he's not like the others, he's not the others, but he does different things and so on. And that whole thing is like so corny. I mean, I don't know what fits these cliches, but this is such an unfortunate cliche at the time. Think about like the main character being not like the others, and I mean, I'm sorry, but the honestly just straight up manic pixie dream girl that Clarice herself is. Guy Montag himself is so dull. His wife is such a cardboard cutout, as are her friends. Yeah, I do think the female characters are especially bad, but even the male ones are just terribly written. I mean, BT is like the mouthpiece for the author. He takes BT as a person who he puts all of his thoughts and opinions directly into the character's mouth so that this character can explain the concept of the book to us, because apparently we're like way too fucking dumb to understand what the book is about. And I know that a lot of you may think that the wife being a cardboard cutout is fine because she's obviously supposed to represent someone who is very shallow and so on, but thing is, it doesn't really work like that, because people in real life are honestly three-dimensional. Whether they watch TV a lot or not, people honestly have depth to them. The thing is, a lot of adjusters don't really care to know someone enough to understand how deep they are, and just assume that because someone is obsessed with TV or whatever, they have nothing going on in their brains or whatever, which is one of the ideas that I hate so much about this book. And again, I do not agree with the ideas in this book, but I also have issues with the story itself and how it's written, so it's really more than that. My next point is theft, and I'm sure you can already figure out how I feel about this one. Again, no stars for this one. The title of this video, I do mention that I think this is outdated, which I know is probably a very unpopular opinion, because I've heard from a lot of people that this book is so important these days and so on. But honestly, I don't think there's that much to be taken from this book. I don't think I'm not sure in the 50s there ever was something to take from this book, but I definitely don't think there's a lot to it today. The subject itself is relevant, but a book is obviously more than just a subject. It's about how you take it and what you do with it. And the way that this book takes a subject and what it does with it is honestly just laughable. If you grew up in the early 2000s, you have probably heard like at least 20 people tell you that TV rots your brain and you should read books instead, and so on and so on. And I grew up with people being very sanctimonious about the whole reading thing throughout my life. Again, I'm not sure how it was in the 50s, but today book publishers are definitely not that selective about the books that they publish, because you have a lot of books, really, really bad books, very shallow books going on out there and you have to really get through them in order to find good books, and aren't just like mindless entertainment. So how is that any different from finding a good TV show or finding a good movie? I mean, they're just types of media, you know. It's not really smarter necessarily, at least not today, to read a book than to watch a TV show or to watch a movie. There's movies and TV shows that go really deep, and there's books that just don't go any deeper than TV rots your brain. And even taking all that out of the equation, this book, in the way it tells its message, is so heavy-handed that you might as well be reading an article. Because if your version of a novel is to tell the message by putting it directly into the mouths of the characters, then don't write a novel. Because that's not really what it is. I mean, you're supposed to tell the message through the actual plot, through the things that are going on and how things happen, you know, and that's kind of what gives the reader the capacity to interpret different things from it. But this is already interpreted for you. It's just too easy and therefore lazy to have a character have a whole monologue about what the book is about and what you should take from the book. It's actually condescending in a way as well. The last point that I want to go through is my personal enjoyment of the book. No surprise at all that I gave it no stars for this as well. I just have a few reasons to enjoy this. I have already gone through them all. I was a little bit touched by the part, again, where Guy Montag recites poetry for these women, but honestly, again, the whole part itself is so forced in the plot that it doesn't really make sense, so it kind of takes you out of the emotional part of the scene. In my case, it did anyway. And for most of the time I was reading this book, I just wanted to be done with it because I just couldn't bear it. I mean, it's only like 150 pages, so I shouldn't really feel like that about a book, but this was so preachy and just shallow. I mean, I was so unimpressed by this book the first time I read it because there was nothing that I had not expected in it. Because again, I think for my generation, it's like such a cliche thing to think that books are inherently better than TV or whatever. So that's basically why I think this book is outdated and also pretty bad just in general. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Even if you didn't, I would like to know your thoughts about this book and whether you agree or disagree and why that is. And I will see you in the next video.